Today I have 5 pumpkin projects under $5. Welcome to the Chic Show. Today's video is part of 5 under $5 hosted by Emily at Farm Charm Chic and guest hosted by Cindy at Z9 Designs. This pumpkin is from Dollar Tree from last year. The first thing I'm going to do is remove all of those embellishments and then sand down the extra glue and give it a coat of Waverly chalk paint in ink. Once that is completely painted, I'm going to tape off some lines using painter's tape. I'm just using a little piece as a spacer, and I'm just going as straight as I can across the pumpkins. Now I'm going to be painting those lines in between the pieces of tape with white chalk paint, and this will take a couple of coats to get it completely covered. I'm pulling the tape away, and my paint is actually almost dry here, as you can see, but you can pull it away when it's wet, and it had virtually no bleeding at all. Now this wood pumpkin plaque is also from Dollar Tree, and I'm just using a sponge here to give it a couple of coats of Waverly chalk paint in pumpkin. Now this little pumpkin's going to be a Jacko Lantern, so I'm going to give him a Jacko Lantern face. I'm just going to freehand and pencil in a Jacko Lantern face, and then I will go over it with a paint pen. Keep in mind when using a paint pen, it does need time to dry. It's not like using a Sharpie that dries almost instantly. This does need a little bit of time to dry, and I have been notorious for smearing it. This whole piece is based off something that I saw on Pinterest, so I'm just kind of embellishing all the way around my pumpkin as I saw them do on the piece on Pinterest. And then I'm going to add some little white polka dots just to highlight the face. I am a terrible bow maker, so there was no reason for me to put this on video, so I did make my bows offline. If you want to know how to make bows, I would watch Olivia's Romantic Home. She's really good at it, but it would have taken forever for me to film this. So you can see how I'm going to be adding the bows onto the pumpkins and the smaller pumpkin onto the larger pumpkin. You can also see that I used a black and a white paint pen to make some little polka dots all around the black and white pumpkin. And I think this little pumpkin set is absolutely adorable. Pumpkin DIY number 2 took many twists and turns, but I am starting out with this paper clay, and I'm just going to roll it to the size that I need it in order to make an impression using one of IOD's Fruitful Harvest pumpkin stamps. I'm rolling over the stamp gently with my rolling pin to make that impression into the clay, and then I'm going to use a clay tool to cut out around that pumpkin. Set the pumpkin aside for a minute, and I'm going to give this entire piece a coat of Waverly chalk paint in ink. This is a piece from Dollar General that I got on clearance after their summer sale, and I'm simply going to give it one good coat of that black chalk paint. Now I'm using Plaster by Waverly to paint my pumpkin. And here's where things started to kind of go off the rails. So I didn't like the black, so I changed it to the gray paint from Waverly called Elephant. And I painted just that inside. I used a black ink pad first to try to use part of the Wreath Maker stamp from IOD. I used green first, and that did not work. My green was just not a bright enough color, so I went back and just used black. I applied the stamp at the bottom of the picture and also at the top. I've decided to change the color of the pumpkin. So I think this is Waverly chalk paint in sandstone. I really don't remember. It's not mineral paint, it's not mineral by Waverly. I do believe it is sandstone. And then I'm going to be using some Type Bond Quick and Thick to glue my pumpkin to the frame. And yet I still don't have enough dimension, I feel like, in that pumpkin, so I'm using my black ink pad and I'm just kind of stamping gently over the top of that pumpkin. And that seems to give me the depth that I'm looking for. Now I decided to need a little something extra, so I used some gold rub and buff to fill in the little berries on the wreath, which are very bright, but I'm going to fix that in a minute. And then I went around in some of these larger places on the pumpkin and just added some detail with that gold paint. Because the berries were a little too bright, I went back with some rub and buff in black and put a little dot in the middle of them to kind of tone them down. This is one of those projects that took entirely too long, but let me know what you think. So I can't let fall or Halloween go by without making an oyster shell jack-o'-lantern. So this one seemed to have the perfect mouth for a jack-o'-lantern, so I'm going to be painting the inside with orange chalk paint. Actually, it's Pumpkin by Waverly, and I'm going to leave that little black spot. Every shell has one of these little spots. I don't know what they're called. If you know what they're called, leave me a comment, so I'm sure there's a name for it. This did take a couple of coats of the orange paint, and I did go back and clean up that little boo-boo that I made in the mouth. And then I used a pencil to draw on my jack-o'-lantern face, and I'm using that paint pen again to go back and color it in. I also decided to go ahead and color in the mouth area just so it would match the eyes and the nose. I used my miter shears to cut a little stem for my pumpkin. I just used hot glue to attach my stem to the top of the pumpkin, and then I just held it in place until it set up. And to finish him off, I used some triple thick to paint on the inside and some gold paint to paint around the edges. You could use black around the edges if you'd like, or even orange, but I like the gold because I like the finish that it gives and gives it a little bit of a higher end look. This is a liquid gold paint that I'm using just a cheap brush with, because whatever brush you use with it will be ruined, so you don't want to use a really good brush. This is a cute little ring dish or jewelry dish, or you could drill a hole and make it an ornament. I thrifted a couple of these wood chunky pieces that somebody had already DIY'd, and I tried to remove all the paper and I just couldn't get it off, so I decided just to use the back. So I gave it all one coat of orange chalk paint, and then I'm rubbing around the edges with my candle wax so that the next coat of paint won't stick to those places and will give it kind of a rustic look. I'm going to go back with a light coat, a messy coat really, of Waverly chalk paint in ink. That dried, I used my Waverly chalk paint in pumpkin again just to paint a messy coat onto the top of the block. And once again, using my black paint pen, I'm drawing on that pumpkin face or that jack-o'-lantern face and coloring it in. Now I can embellish it with a little bit of Spanish moss and that pumpkin stem. My last pumpkin project today is using one of these Halloween boxes from Dollar Tree from last year. I gave it a coat of pumpkin chalk paint by Waverly, and I'm using some of IOD's etiquette stamps to stamp in random places all over the box. To embellish my little book box, I'm using some of these wheat stems from Dollar Tree, and I just want 3 of them, so I'm going to cut them apart and pull apart the pieces that I want and put them back together. I hot glued a little piece of burlap ribbon around the wheat, and then I hot glued that to the top of the box along with the Spanish moss and the wood stem. I also added just a dollop of hot glue to hold that ribbon where I wanted it. And now this little pumpkin box is finished, and it will still open, and you can hide your remotes or other things inside. If you haven't heard, I'm almost to 2,500 subscribers, and I am going to do a giveaway when I reach that milestone. Free to subscribe, and I won't be sending you any junk mail or anything like that. Thanks again to Emily and Cindy for hosting today's playlist. Be sure and check out their channels and the playlist in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.